Hello Year 11. This lesson is carrying on looking at development indicators, which is what we were doing in school before some of you had to go off. So development indicators, if you remember, are the things that we look at in order to make a determination about how developed a country is and what the quality of life there is like. So for example, we might look at the amount of income that the people are earning. We might look at the amount of doctors there are per people. We might look at life expectancy. We might look at what the literacy rate is, so how many people can read and write. And that will give, all of those things together will give us an indication of what life is like in that country. Now, if you remember, we said that you should not look at those measures in isolation because they each only look at one thing. And the thing is about these measures is they often link together. So if you look at some of these scatter graphs, we can see that there are a relationship between them. So this one at the bottom here, you've got GDP along the bottom, so how much money people are making, and you can see that that is increasing as we go along the graph. And here we have got the life expectancy. And as we would probably expect to happen, as the GDP increases, so does the life expectancy. Because as people are earning more money, they can afford better and more nutritional food. They can pay more tax to the government, and maybe the healthcare systems in those countries are going to be better because of that. If we look at this one showing infant mortality, so the amount of children that are dying before their first birthday, and the relationship that has to the GDP, we can see that as the GDP gets higher, the infant mortality rate comes down, so fewer children are dying. So these measures have a relationship to each other, and because of that, it's better to always try to look at more than one when you are trying to decide what the quality of life is like in a country. So this lesson, we are going to look at a development measure that does look at more than one, and that development measure is called the Human Development Index, or the HDI for short, and that is something that I did mention briefly in our lesson in school. Now, the way the Human Development Index works is it takes three different measures and it puts them all together. The three measures it uses are the GNI, so the income per capita per person, and that GNI has been adjusted in order to show the value of money in that country. It then looks at life expectancy because that suggests what the level of healthcare is going to be like if we look at how long people are expected to live. And it then looks at the average number of years of schooling for people in a country, which is helpful to let us know what the level of education is. So we've got two measures that are social with the life expectancy and the education, and one measure that is economic with the GNI. And what it does is it puts these amounts into a formula and it pops a number out of the end. And basically the closer that number is to the whole figure of 1, the better the level of development in that country. So if a country ends up with a score of 0.944, like Norway here, then that is suggesting that that country is incredibly well developed. And that is as compared to a country like Niger, which is in Africa, which has only got a score of 0.337. So this one here, Norway, is far closer to the figure of 1 than this country here, Niger. So Norway has a far better quality of life than Niger does. So what I would like you to do just for a moment before we carry on is to just jot down a few ideas that you might have of where in the world you're going to find countries that have got a high Human Development Index, where you'd find ones that are about the middle, and where you would find ones that were near the bottom. So just do that, and then in a moment we'll have a little look at a map. Okay, so here is a map showing areas with the Human Development Index, and hopefully it's sort of fitting a pattern that you thought would exist. On this map we can see that the green areas have high development, the yellow through to like the peachy colour has got medium development, and the pink through to the reds has got low development. Okay, so the high development is anything about above sort of 0.8, so quite close to 1. And we can see we've got Australia, New Zealand, we have got the USA, Canada, we've got Greenland, which is sort of linked to Denmark. We've got the UK, France, Germany. We've also got ones that you might be a little bit surprised about in the pale green. So in South America, we've got Argentina and Chile. We've got Mexico. But these are countries that do have high levels of development when it comes to things like schooling, because people do go to school there. They go to secondary school, often go on to universities and colleges. So that's going to really, really boost their figures, even though their income in places like Mexico is going to be nowhere near the income that we get in the UK. We've then got these areas with a medium human development index. So we've got large areas of Asia, we've got South America, we've got Northern Africa here. And then finally, areas with a low development on the human development index. The vast majority of those countries are here in the sort of Central African, Sub-Saharan African area. So hopefully that's not sort of come as a surprise to you, and that is what you thought you would have seen. Now, if we look at the Human Development Index for 2019, we can see here the top 10 countries. And I'm sure that these aren't particularly surprising. If I had asked you to name countries where you thought that the quality of life was good and people had a good lifestyle, this is probably what you would have expected. For number 4, where it says Hong Kong, China, it doesn't mean the whole of China. It just means Hong Kong. And for those of you that aren't too up on your sort of Asian British politics, Hong Kong used to belong to the British, and it's only in the last few years that it's been handed over to Chinese rule. So life in Hong Kong is very different from the way life is for a lot of people in China. Okay, the UK, out of 189 countries who submitted data for their HDI to be worked out, comes in at 15th place, okay, joint with the United States, so 0.92. Really, really high Human Development Index score. And without fail, pupils that I teach for all the years I've been teaching geography are always surprised by this. They always seem to expect the United Kingdom to be a lot lower down. But it's worth noting that you are, very fortunate to live in an incredibly well developed, incredibly wealthy country. Lots of people in the world do not live the standard of life you have and have access to the healthcare and the education and the money that you have access to. Finally, the bottom is a very, very different story. Okay, we can see African nations really, really heavily represented, and we're down in the sort of 0.3s rather than the 0.9s like we have for the most developed nations. So we can see that the Human Development Index is really, really good because we just get a really nice, simple measure of a single number, but it includes 3 different factors, and it's really, really easy for us to compare different countries and to be able to say, well, this country appears to be more or less developed than another one. So using the Human Development Index has different pros and cons. So the good things about it is it combines 3 indicators, so it's the most reliable, and that GNI is adjusted to show purchasing power parity. This is what we talked about in lesson, where we said if I had £10,000 and I gave half to one person and I gave half to another person, I sent one person off to New York and I sent one person off to Bangkok. The person who went to Bangkok would be able to buy more things because Thailand is cheaper than the United States. So when the GNI is adjusted to show purchasing power parity, that means that GNI has been either bought up or bought down in order to reflect how much things cost in that country. Okay, things that are not so good about using the HDI, well, not all countries submit data. They don't have to. They're under no obligation to do so. The data is only as good as the collection method, so sometimes countries are accused of lying about their data to make them look better than they really are. And just as with all the measures, it only shows an average, okay? It hides extremes. It's also worth noting that although it combines 3 indicators, those indicators are only social and economic. It doesn't include any kind of environmental or political indicator. And those environmental factors and political factors can have a real bearing on the quality of your life. So what you need to do for me is make sure that you understand why it's important to look at more than one development indicator at a time, because they have this relationship to each other, okay? make sure that on this slide you have written down what the Human Development Index is made up of and how it works, okay? That it takes these three factors together and then puts it through a formula, ploughs it out, and you get a number. And the closer that number is to 1, the better the development of that country. And then finally, just make yourself aware of some of the good and not so good things about using the Human Development Index. So you might get a question on your exam asking you to judge the Human Development Index to say what extent it's a useful way of measuring development. Okay, so that just finishes off for us development indicators and how they work. Obviously, if you've got any questions about any of that, do make sure that you drop me an email or any of the geography teachers. Okay, thanks, Year 11. Bye.